Mayday!
Netflix has just revived the story of the Hevelius, the tragic ferry disaster of 1993. The vessel sank on the Baltic route between Świnoujście, Poland and Ystad, Sweden. Only 9 of 64 people on board survived. The film and several investigations point to a combination of mechanical failure and human error as the key factors behind the disaster. At Noise&Patterns, we're not trying to reopen that debate. Instead, we're looking at one element that was often pushed into the background: the weather. The weather's significance was minimized by officials who authorized the ferry's departure. However, following the accident, it was often exaggerated by certain media outlets. So we're stripping the story down to one question: what were the conditions the Hevelius really sailed into? Hevelius departed at 11:35 p.m. on January 13th, more than 2 hours behind schedule. The voyage was expected to take around 7.5 hours. By the evening, a severe storm was already developing over the southern Baltic. The ferry was known for its instability and history of incidents, but the harbour master's office still gave it clearance to depart. The vessel headed north, where at some point it crossed paths with another German ship. An extreme manoeuvre in heavy seas caused a severe list, and the ferry eventually capsized and sank at 5:12 a.m. The upcoming analysis does not seek to determine the cause of the disaster. It provides a detailed examination of the weather data from that night and invites meteorology specialists to contribute their insights in the comments. In our study, we looked at how pressure, wind, temperature, and wave height evolved over those dark, uneasy hours. The data, centered on the exact location of the ferry disaster, came from 2 leading sources: the European Centre for Medium-Range Weather Forecasts and the Copernicus Marine Environment Monitoring Service. The first graph reveals the wind direction, the worst possible scenario, pressing the vessel almost perpendicular to its course. Strong winds generate high waves, and the Baltic waves are far from forgiving. Our maritime expert described them as short and steep, and hitting the hull with high frequency. The rose diagram shows the wave distribution relative to the blue line, marking the route between Świnoujście and Ystad. Hevelius tried to take the shortest path to make up for the delayed departure, but also, to avoid a collision, it made a U-turn and was heading towards Świnoujście at the moment of the disaster. According to some sources, the captain made that decision because he didn't want to head into the waves directly. When we look at the wind speed and wave height plots over time, an eerie pattern emerges. On this graph, the moment of sinking is marked with a vertical dotted red line. Coincidentally, the graphs form the shape of a giant wave, peaking at the moment of the disaster. It's as if the maritime forces gathered all their strength, then eased away after the final blow. This momentum was caused by a sudden drop in pressure, from 1,015 to 988 hectopascals, which may have triggered an explosive cyclogenesis event, also known as a weather bomb or meteorological bomb, the northern equivalent of a hurricane. From this perspective, it looks like really bad luck for the Hevelius. It set off more than 2 hours late, which caused its route to intersect with a smaller vessel that had the right of way, right at the height of the storm. The question remains: was the sudden worsening of the weather something that could have been forecast while the ferry was still in the departure harbour? Now let's analyse how strong the storm was at the moment of the sinking. A careful viewer may notice that the wave height at the peak moment was around 3 to 4 meters, depending on the source. That's not much, especially when compared to the size of the Hevelius. So, why do numerous accounts mention waves 6 to 8 meters high? The explanation may lie in the Rayleigh distribution law, which shows that for 4-meter average waves, the maximum height could reach 8 meters, and in extreme cases, even 10. Numbers that only add to the horror of that night. In just 6 hours, the energy of the waves multiplied 5-fold. The wind's strength grew by a factor of 4.7, pressing against the hull with 393 kilonewtons of pressure, the equivalent of a 40-ton truck slamming into the ferry at 90 kilometers per hour, again and again and again. The Netflix production concludes the series by stating that this tragedy contributed to the rule that today, the final decision on departure rests with the captain. How that law has impacted safety at sea is yet another fascinating case to analyze. Thank you for watching. If you'd like to discover more stories hidden in the data, subscribe to our channel. You can find more of our work at noiseandpatterns.com.